studios here in American Family Radio. Thank you for listening. We got a lot to talk about this half hour. And coming up in just a little bit, our guest will be Jack David. We're going to talk about North Korea for a few minutes. That's going underreported in the news. I think the situation with North Korea, they're firing weapons out into the Pacific Ocean. What threat do they are they to our friends and allies in Asia and or to our continental United States? We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, so you want to stay tuned for that. But first of all, Gary, before we get to the gun control debate, I have one question to ask you. And Gary, understand that Right Wing Watch is going to have you on with your answer this afternoon.
I'll be disappointed.
So be careful and don't slip into Wildman conspiracy theories, okay?
Okay.
Although I don't have too many of them compared to my late colleague Marvin Sanders.
And you were talking yesterday about just your theory about spiritual warfare involved in that shooting, and then it turns out yesterday I saw a post that this guy was a literal devil worshiper. He had a page devoted to Satan worship.
Oh, the killer?
The shooter.
In Connecticut? Yeah, well, I mean, I was, surprised somebody would find it controversial that I, Tim Wildman, a Christian who heads a Christian ministry, would believe this guy was satanically influenced, and I believe that. And you're saying that's been confirmed.
Confirmed. Yeah, so it's an odd thing that they would have problems with us believing the same thing that Jesus believed.
Exactly.
There is a Satan and there are evil spirits.
I believe it. I certainly do. I believe that people can be possessed by Satan, and I think that was the case here. But Gary, back to this thing. Do you, if you just step away from the circumstances and look at them objectively, that is the debt that we've been under with President Obama, $6 trillion added of debt since he's been president. $6 trillion, more than all other presidents in the history of the United States of America combined. You have to ask yourself, well, at least I'm asking myself, this is why I want to give you a chance to distance yourself from Wildman here on this one. I have to ask myself, is this man intentionally trying to bankrupt our country so that he can remake it in a socialist, more of a socialist state? Or if it's not intentional, then he must feel like that he can spend whatever he wants to, and because that's what the American people want him to do, because they just reaffirmed this out of control borrowing by voting him in again. So which is it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and since he's a Keynesian, and I for Right Wing Watch, I didn't say a Kenyan, I said a Keynesian, which is somebody that believes the more money you spend, the more money the federal government spends, that stimulates economic growth. You can come up with a rational, logical, but I think wrong reason for what he's doing. This is something conservatives debate all the time. Does he have some other motive? I tend to believe that he just thinks government is the driver of the economy, even though he denies that in interviews. And he actually believes that by taking money out of one group of Americans' pockets and giving it to somebody else is actually the right thing to do. One other thing on this, I do think he's more concerned about income redistribution than he is about income growth. He doesn't focus on making the pie bigger. He's concerned about who each gets a piece of the pie that exists now and whether all those pieces of the pie are equal. Well, of course, in a free society, they'll never be equal. The folks that are better educated, that work harder, that take more risk, et cetera, logical risk, they will always do better. Families that are intact will always do better than single-parent families by definition. But even bringing up these things is to open you up to all kinds of charges of being intolerant and discriminatory and heartless and so forth.
Yeah, but I gotta tell you, man, I hear you, and that's a very good answer. When somebody's rolling this much debt up on the backs of the country, and as Sean Hannity calls it, generational theft. And you got to ask yourself, is this intentional for a purpose anyway? I just it's breathtaking to think of the debt we've incurred under President Obama, and that 51% of the American public said, "Hey, give me some more of that."
Well, they're talking about these tax hikes as taking us back to the tax rates under Clinton. Well, if you went back to the budget under Clinton, the entire federal budget under Clinton each year was not $1 trillion. In other words, Obama's deficit every year is bigger than Clinton's entire budget every year.
Yeah, if the Republicans don't stop him, nobody will. So I think the Republicans need to bow up right here, and they need to stick by their convictions and say, hey, we were elected too, and they need to do what's best for the country and start cutting the government size. If they don't, then we're all toast. That's
and Gary, the president yesterday said, look, it's time for the Republicans to stop playing politics and start listening to their constituents. And I'm saying, that's what I want the Republicans to do. Listen to your constituents. We didn't send you there to raise taxes on anybody. We sent you there to cut spending, so listen to your constituents.
The president and the media act like Obama got 65% of the vote. It's a very, very narrowly divided country. Only a couple of points separated Obama from Romney, and I don't believe the president has any mandate to pursue bigger government and more taxes.
Well, this issue of winning the election, and the Democrats are right that the Democrat Party won the election for the Oval Office, but the Republican Party won the election for the House of Representatives. And you look at the state level, Gary, where you've got, I think now 27 states maybe that are basically one-party rule, where Republicans have the gubernatorial mansion. They have both houses of the legislature. So, again, to think that there's some kind of overwhelming progressive mandate out there, I'm not seeing it.
I agree completely.
Hey, what about this whole gun control thing? I know many Americans feel better now that Vice President Joe Biden has been selected by President Barack Obama to take the lead for the White House in this area of... I will say this. Vice President Biden is very good at shooting himself in the foot.
So to speak, to coin a phrase.
Yes. So, but I mean, Gary, is this
if anybody needs to be gun control, it'd be Joe. We got to take that weapon out of his hands before he shoots himself in his other foot.
Good old Joe. Is this thing going anywhere?
Well, I'm afraid it will. It is going to go somewhere. I mean, again, you've got this difficult combination of politicians willing to exploit this incident and a media that is engaged in sensationalism. The events in Connecticut are they're just horrible. I mean, every heart is broken. I can't imagine going through what those parents are going through. Virtually everything that's being recommended now in Washington, D.C. will have had absolutely nothing to do with stopping an event like that. In fact, over the last 20 years, we've had more availability to guns, and what happened is the crime rate actually went down. These types of events, these horrible mass shootings, appear to be trending up, but it's very difficult to make a correlation between that and the ownership of firearms. The killer in this case did not purchase these guns. He tried to purchase them. He was turned down. He stole the guns from his mother. So none of the things they're talking about would have prevented him from committing that crime in his own home, and then the just horrific crime that he committed in the school. And I guess what is really depressing about this is that in this national conversation we're told we ought to have now, which I'm perfectly willing to have and desire to have, almost all the things that matter in that conversation are off limits. You can't talk about the breakdown of the family and the number of boys that are being raised with no fathers. You can't talk about the fact that we've kicked God out of the public square, or the fact that more and more Americans don't believe there is any afterlife or any judgment in that afterlife. For years, history taught us the two things that stop people from doing really bad things is fear of punishment in this life or fear of punishment in the next life. And both of those things have eroded in recent decades. So I would love to have a conversation about the death culture that the president alluded to yesterday, movies that glorify violence, music that glorifies it, these horrible video games that now 9 and 10-year-olds are being exposed to, the whole idea that somewhere in our Constitution there is a right to take innocent human life and what that does to our psyche. There's lots of things that can be discussed, but as usual, we're now off on this mad rush to cut back the rights guaranteed to us under the Second Amendment to own firearms.
You know, Gary, and I'm thinking about what George Washington said. You were talking about the very things that are the most important for us to be talking about in this debate are the very ones that are off limits. You know, George Washington said that religion and morality were indispensable supports of political prosperity. And political prosperity includes peace and stability and equilibrium and the rule of law and all those things. And he says you simply cannot have those things without religion, by which he meant Christianity, and morality, by which he meant the Ten Commandments. And you try to bring that into the conversation here, you just get demonized and vilified. That's ruled out of bounds. Can't even talk about those things.
Well, you're right, and the stupidity here, you know, this mad rush for gun-free zones. People, think about this. The only individuals that will recognize and follow the restrictions and allow a place, a school, a shopping center to be a gun-free zone are law-abiding people. The murderer isn't going to be deterred by a sign outside the school or outside the shopping center that says this is a gun-free zone. All that sign's going to do is encourage him that when he goes in to commit his evil act, there will be no one in there capable of stopping him.
Yeah. Well, listen, Gary, we're out of time. Thank you so much for yours. What is your website information again?
It's OurAmericanValues.org, and I wish you and everybody at AFA and all your listeners a blessed Christmas, and hopefully in 2013 all of us will enjoy all of God's blessings.
Amen. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
Thank you.